Go ahead.
Our mission: Helping Parents Heal is a nonprofit organization dedicated to assisting bereaved parents to become shining light parents by providing support and resources to aid in the healing process. We go a step beyond other groups by allowing the open discussion of spiritual experiences and evidence for the afterlife in a non-dogmatic way. Affiliate groups welcome everyone, regardless of religious or non-religious background. Attendance today at this meeting is voluntary, and we are here for the benefit of learning from and sharing with other parents whose child has passed away. It is understood that our discussions are intended to be confidential and not designed to replace traditional therapy or spiritual counseling. However, these Zoom meetings are helpful to parents all around the world, and they are posted on YouTube so that affiliate members who are not able to attend this meeting live can also watch. Helping Parents Heal offers a wide variety of speakers to allow parents to be informed about many possible ways to heal, to connect with their children, and to learn about the afterlife. The views expressed by our guests do not necessarily reflect those of Helping Parents Heal, and we ask that you take from their presentations whatever may benefit you personally. Welcome, everyone. We're so glad you're here this evening, and thank you so much, Mark, for being here.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for tuning in tonight. I always enjoy working with Helping Parents Heal, and I was telling Elizabeth and Irene that I always try to give a boost to Helping Parents Heal in all the interviews that I've been doing since the release of my book, because I've worked with a lot of grief groups, a lot of spiritual organizations, and Helping Parents Heal is in a class all by itself. And the work that this group does is just beautiful.
Thank you. I want to introduce you just a little bit because people might not know how amazing you are. So if it's okay, maybe I can just say a little bit about you before you start speaking. And thank you so much for talking about us to other groups, because this is just so important for us as well. Mark Anthony, the psychic lawyer, aka Psychic Explorer, is the author of the spiritual bestsellers Evidence of Eternity, Never Letting Go, and The Afterlife Frequency. Mark Anthony's credentials and experience are unparalleled in the paranormal world. He is an Oxford-educated trial attorney licensed to practice law in Florida, Washington, D.C., and before the United States Supreme Court. In England, he studied mediumship at the prestigious Arthur Findlay College for the Advancement of Psychic Science. Dr. Gary Schwartz, who will also be speaking at our conference, professor of psychology, medicine, neurology, psychiatry, and surgery at the University of Arizona, and director of the Laboratory for Advances in Consciousness and Health, has ranked Mark as one of the top mediums in the United States. Mark Anthony, the psychic lawyer, is the media's go-to guy when the paranormal and legal system collide. He appears regularly on television as a legal analyst, psychic medium, and expert on the paranormal, after-death communication, and near-death experiences. Mark Anthony has the reputation as the psychic Indiana Jones. In addition to his expertise as an attorney, he has an extensive background in science, quantum physics, survival of consciousness, and near-death experiences, as well as history, archaeology, philosophy, and theology. One day, Mark is lecturing at an Ivy League university about quantum physics, and the next off to mystical locations in remote corners of the world to explore ancient ruins and supernatural phenomena. There's so much more to be said about Mark, but for more information about him, his books, tour schedule, or personal readings, kindly visit his website, www.evidenceofeternity.com. And without further ado, please join me in welcoming Mark Anthony, the psychic lawyer.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you, Irene. And like I said before, welcome everybody. It's an honor to be here.
So we would love to hear more about your amazing book. So if you're willing to just tell us a synopsis of your book, that would be wonderful, the newest one. And obviously there are three
I
that
just happen to have a copy of it right here.
and it's beautiful. I love the cover.
Thank you. The Afterlife Frequency is my latest book, and it was released on October 12th. And I do have to say that I'm very, very honored and humbled by the response that it's gotten. It shot to #1 bestseller status on Amazon. My publisher said it's already gone into a second printing. I was informed by Columbia University that it's been submitted for a Pulitzer Prize. And then Rocky and I found that Shirley MacLaine, the legendary actress, Academy Award winner, and spiritual icon, recommended it in her newsletter for November and December. And like I said, it's very overwhelming to see this type of response. And the Afterlife Frequency, I've been working on this book for years. It took me 6 years to write and longer to do the research and to compile the stories on this. And what I've found is that traditionally, the different types of spirit communication, whether it's through a medium, through a deathbed vision where a loved one is dying and he or she talks about seeing spirits. And we now know that people in close proximity to that person oftentimes will report seeing spirits, not just family and close friends, but healthcare workers, hospice workers. Then there's near-death experiences, shared death experiences, out-of-body experiences, visitations. And I bet everybody who's here tonight has had some form of after-death communication where your child and or other loved ones have made some form of contact. And what I saw is that these different forms of spirit communication are being treated as separate phenomena. It's kind of like a salad bar. It's like, well, we got mediumship over here, and we got near-death experiences over here, and deathbed visions over here, but they're not separate. I saw a common denominator between all of them. Not only am I a medium, but I'm also a near-death experiencer, but I'm a researcher and an observer. And I saw that they all are different forms of what I have termed interdimensional communication. In other words, we live in this material world dimension, and we're communicating with another dimension, which I call the afterlife frequency. It can also call it the other side. And that all of these involve energy transfer and frequency alignment. And when I was 8 years old, my dad was my hero because he had been a Navy SEAL and he was a NASA engineer. And so here I am at the ripe old age of 8, and my dad works with astronauts. I mean, I was just beside myself. And we talked a lot. And I remember one night we were looking at the stars, and he said, "Mark, there's no such thing as a mystery. There's only questions for which we do not yet have the answers." And he said, and if enough funding, enough research, and enough dedication go into something, we will have an answer. And so that kind of set the tone for my life when it comes to studying these type of phenomenon. And that's why I wrote the Afterlife Frequency, because there's a reason why these things happen, how they happen, and where they happen. And all of it is explainable through science based on quantum physics. And I know when people hear quantum physics, you immediately think, oh, dear Lord, it's going to be like drinking liquid cement, okay, to get through this book. Well, I went to law school and I practiced law, and I read more boring books, opinions. I mean, there's some judges that have beautiful legal minds, but no gift whatsoever for making anything interesting. And I promise that I will not inflict that upon my readers. So the Afterlife Frequency reads like a juicy novel because it's illustrated by stories. And I've learned from being an attorney that you can take a complex concept and explain it in a way that anybody can understand it. Because really, who wants to sit there and wade through all these technical explanations and things? Let's put it into language that we all can relate to and then illustrate it with a story. Then some of them are going to touch your heartstrings. Some of them are funny. Some of them are tragic. And so that is part of what went into me writing the Afterlife Frequency.
So first of all, I have some questions actually from some of the people who have read your book. And I especially, I was telling you earlier that I have a friend who is in Paris, and unfortunately she can't be here this evening because of the fact that it's a little bit early in the morning for her to be on. But one of the things that you talk about in the book is shifting our alpha theta brainwaves to be able to move into this state where we can connect with all of our loved ones in spirit. She asked what the best way to do that is when you're not a medium as you are. Is there anything that you can tell us about that?
Well, see, a lot of my colleagues, and with all due respect to my colleagues that are mediums, they're all like, I'm going to turn you into a medium. Take my course, read my book, I'll turn you into a medium. The Afterlife Frequency is not about turning you into a medium, because the truth is we're not all mediums. In other words, I can swim, but I am never going to be Michael Phelps. I can bang around on a piano, but don't expect Elton John, Billy Joel, Rachmaninoff to happen. I can do math, but I'm no Elon Musk. Okay. The truth is we're all good at doing different things. And that being said, we can all have a psychic and mediumistic experience, even though we're not all mediums. Why? Because we have the same basic physiology. There's two areas in our body, the pineal gland in our brain and the solar plexus in our diaphragm. And the solar plexus, these are the two psychic receptor areas in our body. And I explain these in great detail in the book and how they operate. The reason the solar plexus, and for anyone that's done yoga, you've heard about the solar plexus chakra. The reason that it's called the solar plexus is because it is the most complex bundle of nerves outside of the cerebral cortex in the body, and they radiate out from the solar plexus like the rays of the sun. That's why it's called the solar plexus. But you're all parents. And how many of you have received that feeling in your gut, your stomach, that, oh my gosh, something happened to my child? I bet all of you have. Or let's say women's intuition. All right, every woman here has women's intuition. I know that. And guys will call it gut instinct because that's more Denzel and Harrison Ford. Okay, but the point is, this extremely complex bundle of nerves picks up on vibrational frequency. And this is the psychic receptor area in our body where we get feelings, sensations, and premonitions. Talk to military personnel and first responders. They call it your gut instinct, and that's what it is. It's right here in your gut. Now, the pineal gland in your brain, it's about 4 inches behind the center of your forehead. It's the proverbial third eye chakra. And the pineal gland is bigger than a grain of rice, smaller than a lima bean, and it's the most mysterious organ in the human body. It's been studied for decades. It controls our brain wave frequencies, and that's where I'm getting to this, to your question, or your friend's question, Elizabeth. It controls our circadian rhythms, when we're awake, when we're hungry, our activity levels. It governs our ability to perceive light. And there was a British and German study, and then later on a French and Israeli study, which discovered calcite and magnetite crystals inside of the pineal gland. Now, what was the first radio? A piece of quartz crystal, which is calcite, with a copper wire running low levels of electricity into it. In other words, we have a radio station in our heads, very, very sophisticated. Now, The pineal gland regulates our brainwave frequencies. We have 5 different brainwave frequencies. We have gamma, which is ultra high. All right, think Ken Jennings and Matamodio on Jeopardy. That's gamma. Okay, you're functioning at ultra high frequency. Then there's beta. That's our normal state. That's what we're all in right now. We're awake. We're able to function, pay our bills, drive our car. Then as we start to relax, let's say you meditate, or as you're drifting off to sleep, or you waft into a daydream, or you're sitting in a law class struggling to stay awake. That's the alpha state. I call it the groovy baby state, because you start feeling like really good. And then you drift from alpha into theta, which is dream sleep. The last area or brainwave frequency is delta. Very little brainwave activity going on there, but delta is important. That's when we heal, we repair our bodies. So delta is important, but it's the alpha theta border where psychic and mediumistic activity occurs. And it creates a brainwave frequency receptive to spirits. They spot that. They bring their frequency down and they get a frequency match with us in the sleep state. Now, for some reason, people like me are able to do this voluntarily and consciously. So I'm able to elevate my brainwave frequency to that alpha theta border while I'm technically in the beta state. Spirits bring theirs down, frequency match. That is the key to spirit communication, not just with mediums, but with all of you. So all of you that have had a dream where your child has come and talked to you and it felt real. It had a beginning, a middle, an ending, and it was clear. And you woke up thinking, I really did talk to my son. I really did experience the love of my daughter, because you did. And so the question is, how can we do that even if we're not a medium? Well, meditation is the building block of all spirit communication and all psychic and spiritual development. Prayer is when we talk to the divine, to God, to spirits. Meditation is when we listen. Well, but how could we explain this to people who aren't mediums? Because spirits send us signals all the time. And Elizabeth, I was trying to figure this out when I was writing the book, and I kept hitting a brick wall. I got that dreaded writer's block, and everybody here who's a writer, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And the pesky thing about writer's block, it always seems to happen on the day that you've scheduled. You had all day to work on your book, and you sit down and nothing. Okay, so I'm sitting here at my computer, nothing. Okay, so I figured, all right, fine. I've written 3 books and countless articles and documents. So I thought I'm going to go for a walk on the beach. I live near the ocean. So I'm heading down my driveway, and I'm headed towards, down my driveway, and I'm going to go to the beach. And all of a sudden I get these cold chills and tingles. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm picking up on some electromagnetic activity here. And I do an about face, and I head in the opposite direction. So I go, okay, something's telling me to head in a different direction. So I go walking down this bike path near my house. It's around 11 in the morning, and I see these 2 objects shining in the light, in the sun. So I walk up to them, and I see it's a nickel and a penny. And I go to pick them up, and both my parents have passed, and I hear my mother's voice. It's bad luck if their heads down. And I started laughing because, my mom's family is of Italian descent, and we have a superstition for all occasions. Don't cross your silverware. Oh, don't walk under a ladder. God forbid you drop and break a mirror. Okay. So I'm laughing because I'm hearing my mom saying that. And then I hear my dad's voice. It's money. Grab it. So now I'm laughing, and I'm holding this nickel and this penny in my hand, and I'm looking at them, and I go, oh, 6 cents. 6 cents. I go, okay. So I know something's going on here. And now my body's immersed in cold chills and tingles. I knew my parents' spirits were trying to tell me something. And then immediately in my mind's eye, I saw my father standing in the ocean up to his waist, and he was holding this blue canvas raft that he had when I was a kid. Now, Dad was a Navy SEAL. He was a scuba diver, a swimming instructor. But I knew this meant something, a raft. And then it hit me. recognize signs from spirits, accept the contact is real, feel it without overthinking it, trust the message. That's it. That's what they were trying to tell me. And I ran back to my computer and the words flew, I like 10 paragraphs flew out of my fingers. And what I discovered was my parents gave me the raft technique. And the afterlife frequency teaches the raft technique how to recognize the signs from spirits, accept that contact is real so that you give yourself permission to have the experience, feel it without overthinking it. Now, this is where everybody goes wrong, myself included. We start overthinking it. Oh, that's probably a grief-induced hallucination. Oh, it's my imagination. Oh, this is just a coincidence. Oh, this can't happen. This is impossible. And so their thing, you hit the brick wall and everything fizzles out. So get rid of that. Feel it, don't overthink it, and then trust the message. And this will work not just for a situation like that, but when you have a dream and you're trying to interpret that visitation from your loved one in a dream. This will work when you're interpreting messages that you receive from your loved ones through a medium like myself. This will help when you're trying to make sense of a near-death experience that you've had, or a shared death experience. When I was talking earlier about people that are having a deathbed vision, somebody is terminally ill and they're transitioning, yet people in close proximity to them experience or catch glimpses of what the transitioning person is having. So the raft technique, I realized my parents were working in conjunction with me, that I wrote a book that explains how the different forms of spirit communication have a common denominator, and they gave me the key to interpreting that, which is the raft technique. But I want to say one more thing about raft. The T, the trust. We live in a crazy world right now. We always have. You know, people say the world's terrible. Really? Was it great during the Roman Empire? How about the Crusades? How about the Great Depression, World War I and II? No, the world's never been the Republic of Kumbaya. But unfortunately, with the internet, which is a wonderful thing, but also there's all these insane conspiracy theories and things swirling around. And there's people. There are unscrupulous people who say they're either shamans or psychics, and they're receiving messages that are motivating them to commit acts of anger, bigotry, hatred, violence, or people that say, I'm a spiritual leader, so here, put on this bomb vest and blow people up. Those are not messages from spirits. Those are not messages from the divine. Those are messages that are created by that person's ego edging God out. And the ego is all about me, me, me. So when you hear people that claim that they're receiving messages that incite insurrections, violence, anger, bigotry, hatred, those have nothing to do with God. Those have nothing to do with spirits. You trust a message when it's about love, healing, inner peace, protection, and resolution. That's when you know that it's a genuine message from a spirit, your loved one, or the divine power that we call God.
That's beautiful. And I just have to say, I love that whole idea of the raft technique being shown to you by your dad, and then the sixth sense. Wow, what an amazing thing to have happen on that walk. And I know that Irene, we have lots of questions in the chat box, but I know Irene has some questions that she'd love to ask you as well. So Irene, go ahead.
Sure. You know, Mark, our members want to be the best possible sitter that they can be when they have a reading with a medium. And I thought it was very interesting when you talked about the no, no, no syndrome. And I thought maybe you could share a little bit about that.
Thank you, Irene. Cyber kiss. Okay. You know, for mediums, you know, people were under attack constantly. Yes, and there's frauds out there, and I won't mention any names. All right, but for those of us who are legitimate, you know, people think we're all knowing and all seeing. We're not. We are a radio station, and we're a conduit for information. So what a spirit does is they're emitting waves of frequency that go into my brain their electromagnetic field interfaces with the electromagnetic field in my brain. And then that impulse gets converted into recognizable concepts based on my memories, feelings, and cultural associations. And so a spirit will give me something, and then I'll convey it to a person. And that's when the client confirms it. And so, but the no, no, no syndrome is where people shoot everything down. No, 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 no. And think about it energetically. It's like you're slamming the door in the spirit's face. We want to keep that door open. So if you don't get it, don't sweat it. All right. If you don't get it right away, it's better to say, I'm not sure. Let me think about it, or I don't know just yet. And here's why. Because after the reading, that's when you're going to reflect. And think of the readings like a flower. It blooms, blossoms, unfolds. That's why I call after the reading the unfolding. And it can take hours, days, weeks, or even longer for the full meaning of a reading to make sense. And so it's very easy to say, no, 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 that doesn't make sense. And one of my favorite examples, I was doing a session for these two ladies. They were sisters, and their mother's spirit came through, and their mother started to talk to me about their other sister. Now, the other sister's alive and well. She just wasn't present at the reading. And the mother kept giving me the name Michael, 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 and 10/11, 10/11, October 11. And they said, come on, Mark, everybody knows somebody named Michael. Of course, we all do. It's a very, very common name. I mean, I think I've got like 3 different cousins named Michael. But they couldn't think of anyone significant connected to them or their family. And then 10/11, October 11, they couldn't think of anything of significance that happened. They're like, no, no, no. I said, look, don't worry about it. Just jot it down. Because if you strain and struggle trying to figure it out, you're generating more no, no, no energy. I said, let's move on to the next segment. Well, 6 weeks later, they contacted me. And they said, Mark, we figured it out. 10 days after the reading with you, it was October 11th, 10/11. And that's the day that Hurricane Michael hit our sister's hometown in Florida. She went into labor 3 weeks early and had her baby girl during Hurricane Michael on 10/11. Boom. Okay. Well, why would anyone think of Michael? Because at the time of the reading, it hadn't formed. Hurricane Michael didn't exist. Why would anyone think of 10/11? That wasn't their sister's due date until it was, because spirits can bring up future events. So just because you don't understand it right away, the other night, I was doing a reading for this husband and wife, and they were the very opposite of the no, no, no syndrome. If they didn't understand something, they said, we're not sure. So I'm doing a phone reading, and they're both on the phone. And the husband's father, whom he never knew, I mean, he knew enough about him. So when I gave a description, he knew like how he died, but he didn't know the man personally, came through and kept saying, 2 snakes, 2 snakes. Well, I'm thinking, okay, snakes. And okay, maybe they have a snake story. And then what I'm thinking, my association is it's like the medical symbol, where there's the staff with the 2 snakes intertwined. And he's like, well, no, he goes, I can't think of anything in my family. Nobody's in the medical profession. And he goes, and it's very important to realize with the raft technique, what I think is the medium doesn't matter. It's what it means to you. I'm just the conduit. The reading's not about me, it's about you. And so this gentleman says, I feel it may be something Native American. And I go, why do you say that? He goes, well, I'm Native American. I go, okay. And it's a phone reading, so I can't see them. So they couldn't figure it out. The following morning, they sent me an email. Not only is he Native American, but he is of the Sioux Nation. And in their language, Sioux literally means 2 snakes. I didn't know that. Okay. And I love it when something I have no idea comes through. And he was all excited because he said, I didn't know that either. And they went through and they gave me they found this book, and they took a picture of the page, and it explained all that. So that's why I always tell people, if you don't understand something right away, don't immediately shoot it down with no, no, no. Just say, I'm not sure. Let me think about it and jot it down. Because everything that comes through in a reading is going to make sense at some point. And other times with the no, no, no syndrome, people overthink it and overanalyze it. They overthink. And that creates a barrier too. You go with the first thing that hits you, and that will be the answer. Like I was doing a session for this electrical engineer about 2 weeks ago. Brilliant guy, but he's an electrical engineer. And in his job, overthinking things is a good idea. And I get it. I'm a lawyer. Okay. We overthink. His mother comes through and wants to talk about his 4 sisters. Now, his 4 sisters are alive. So I say, you have like 4 sisters. He goes, yes. And I go like, Marcia. No, 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 no. She keeps saying Marcia. No, no, no. Finally, so well, what are your sisters' names? Margaret, Marilyn, Marie, Marianne. I go, wait a second. That's it. No, you said Marcia. And it's like, okay. He wasn't getting that I was picking up on the cadence, the MAR part. Because he was an electrical engineer, it had to be exact. You have to realize I'm communicating with another dimension. I'm getting a vibrational sound. And then he stopped and he said, wow, I'm really overanalyzing this, aren't I? I said, look, I have no idea that every woman in your family's name starts with MAR, but your mother does know that, and she's trying to get that to me. And then finally it clicked with him. So those are examples of the no syndrome, and how when people go into a reading, they can sabotage it without meaning to.
Great. Thank you very much. And I'll just ask you one more question, then I'll turn it back to Elizabeth to take questions from the membership. So we talk a lot about when we have a gallery reading that when messages come through, the kids piggyback, they jump onto each other, and
Yes.
Many people can take a validation. So when you talked in the book about messages from collective consciousness, could that be what piggybacking is?
That's exactly what it is. Collective consciousness communication is another one of the new terms I introduced in the Afterlife frequency. And collective consciousness communication has many different forms. So let's say, Irene, I'm doing a reading for you, okay? And everything is making sense to you, but there's 6 or 7 other people in the gallery where it is really resonating with them. And that's, like you described it, piggybacking. Here's what's going on. Spirits know that I'm a finite human being with a finite human brain, and they never show up alone. You know, people are always asking, you know, is my loved one alone? No, they can't be alone. They're part of the collective consciousness. Spirits are energy, which are linked to other spirits, linked to other spirits, linked to other spirits. So when they come through, maybe the message is targeted at you, but there is a commonality with other recipients. And that is very typical of spirit communication. So even if you don't receive an individualized reading, but what comes through resonates with you, touches your heartstrings, take it and accept it. And people say, well, that sounds, you know, far-fetched. Yeah, but human technology, we do this all the time. The military, let's say the Pentagon sends a message to the USS Nimitz, okay? And so they send a message to the Nimitz, and there's one main signal, but then there's 5 or 6 other messages that are encrypted, which are piggybacked on that particular signal. So if human beings technology can do this, don't you think gods can do this? And so we have to realize that spirits are going to get their message through to you one way or the other. And that's why you have to be very, very open. Now, sometimes there is a commonality among the recipients. And the example that I give a lot is that, because it was kind of funny, but it was a perfect example. And Rocky was there with me. I kept hearing Paisley, Paisley, Paisley. And I said, does Paisley make sense to anybody? So I'm doing an event in front of about 100 people. 3 people stood up. And this one lady said, yeah, I was at the mall today and I was walking by Macy's and I just felt that I needed to buy a Paisley skirt. And then there's a gentleman said, my father died recently and I was going through his things yesterday and I decided I wanted his Paisley tie, but I don't know why. And the third woman said, my grandmother's name was Paisley. And then the next message I got was pancreas and thyroid. And then the woman's whose grandmother was Paisley said, my grandmother died from pancreatic cancer. Then the gentleman says, I have thyroid problems, so it's just diagnosed. And then the first lady said, I think I'm pre-diabetic. Okay, so now what do we have there? The commonality was Paisley, and then all the spirits associated with the Paisleys came through. And so collective consciousness communication, it's very complex, but it's also very simple too. And so that is how a multitude of spirits are going to be able to get a message through to several people.
Beautiful. Thank you. Elizabeth and I always say that when one parent receives a message, it's a validation for all of us.
Exactly.
Great.
That is
Okay.
just beautiful. It's such a beautiful explanation. And I also love what you were talking about always keeping from saying no, because I always in a reading, if I hear something that I don't identify with, I'll say, I don't recognize it right now, but I'll remember it for later. And so many of the readings that both you and all of the other mediums who have come on Helping Parents Heal have done have ended up with things obviously that parents are saying no about, but then they'll write in for the newsletter, oh, I knew exactly what that was 5 minutes after I got off. Or it might be something that's going to happen, like you said, which is even more incredible, I think. But it really is important to keep ourselves as a sitter from saying no, because it changes the energy of the reading and it makes it really, really hard for spirit to come through, I'm sure. So,
well, yeah, and you got to realize that an experienced medium, we know when we're getting good information. But some people, I mean, sometimes they get nervous. And I was on a TV show, and unlike a lot of these mediums that have TV shows, which are scripted and canned, where they walk into a pizza parlor and go, hi, I'm a medium, blah, 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 blah. And you get 10 different camera angles, perfect makeup, perfect lighting, perfect sound. All right, let me tell you something. That takes like 8 or 9 hours to film that. All right, but I'm on a talk show, and here we are, and it's live. And I'm drawn to this one woman, and I say, there's a younger male coming through, feels like he died traumatically. And she stands up and she said, well, my son died in an accident. Okay. And I said, cross. I'm seeing a cross. He's giving me cross. And she's staring at me. No, no, no. I go, was he with the Red Cross? I'm getting cross. No, no. And luckily we were coming up to a station break, and this host, she was really cool. She goes, all right, we're going to a station break. All right, so it's a 7-minute segment. Then there's 4 minutes of commercials, and then we go back live. And so this lady's staring at me, and her husband's sitting next to her in his seat, and he goes, well, our last name is Cross. And I'm like, you mean like your son's last name too? They look at each other. Oh yeah, our son's last name is Cross. And I can hear the host of the show. I'm not even going to say what she said. I could hear under her breath going, oh my God. Sorry. So the 4 minutes is up. We're back on air. And she goes, so during the break, Mark Anthony had been saying cross, cross, and these people discovered that their last name was Cross. Mark, why don't you go to somebody else? And now, it's a funny story and all that, but in defense of these people. All right. I'm on TV all the time. I'm in front of people all the time, and we all get stage fright. I mean, I was reading something because I had to do I was appearing as a legal analyst on a show, and it was about the kidnapping of Frank Sinatra Jr. back in the 60s. And I was reading about Frank Sinatra, and he said he got such terrible stage fright. And I'm like, Frank Sinatra, And I'm like, okay. They said Lady Gaga loses her mind before she goes on. So I'm feeling better about myself now, right? These people probably never speak in front of a crowd. They're certainly never on television where there's an audience, a host, cameras, lights. They were terrified. So I have to cut them slack. Now, it's frustrating when people can't recognize their own name, but things like that happen. And that was a perfect example of no, 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 when it should have been yes, yes, yes. Or people overthink things. I was at an event in New York City, and that was another one Rocky was at, and she's everywhere. It's like Rocky's great. She's like having like a crew of 6 people. She does lighting, sound, makeup, event coordination. She fights with the right people that we have to fight with at the venue, and then makes nice and all that. And she's making faces. Not fight. She corrects issues and misunderstandings. How's that? All right. So I zero in on this young lady and I say, there's a male coming through, feels like he's on your father level. She goes, well, yeah, my uncle died. And I said, I'm getting 2 sharp pains in the chest. She said, no, he didn't die of a heart attack. He got shot in the chest. And I'm like, well, I'm pretty sure that hurts, And the thing is, she was thinking pains in the chest had to be a heart attack when he was actually shot twice in the chest. And that was another example of somebody who she's in front of a crowd of people, but she was overthinking it, overanalyzing it. And that's another form of the no syndrome. Most of the time people get it right away, but many times, they freeze or they get nervous. And I understand that. But that's why when you're doing a reading, a one-on-one's, one thing, because you don't have the audience, but in a gallery event, stop worrying about everybody else. Focus on what the medium's saying. Listen to what he or she is saying, and then go with the very first thing that hits you. Like I was doing a reading for a psychologist recently, and she said, this is like dream interpretation. You got to go with what hits you first. Exactly. So it's the same concept.
That's amazing. Oh my gosh. And it is true that it's kind of scary to be in a gallery reading and to be chosen and to be needing to remember things immediately. And I must admit that I went to see a medium. It was actually with Jamie Clark in the very beginning. And he kept telling my husband and I about Dan. Morgan's mentioning Dan. He just won't stop talking about Dan. I could not for the life of me think of who Dan was. And as soon as I walked out of the door, I said, Dan's his best friend. He was the mascot at U of A. I mean, I am just as guilty of that as everyone else is. And that was a private reading. So I was just there with him. It wasn't scary at all, but we did amnesia that grief brings on as well. That's another thing. But there are so many interesting questions here. And I just wanted to ask you a few of them. One is Sheila saying, why is there such a disconnect with the mainstream science on this? We all die. This affects us all, but mainstream science doesn't seem to touch this stuff, still seen as woo-woo. Could you maybe, obviously we have your book.
Here's your answer. Here's your answer. Because this is not a granola, kumbaya, ride your unicorn book, okay? The scientists who have endorsed it are the top near-death experience and survival of consciousness afterlife researchers in the world. And I'm explaining these concepts through quantum physics. But what we have to understand about science is the science is a form of religion, okay? And people who say they believe in it get very entrenched. And I explain in the book, and anyone that's been to my lectures, I'll talk about the divide between faith and science. You have the Newtonian reductionist materialists on one side. That started in the Enlightenment with Sir Isaac Newton, who didn't believe in an afterlife or a soul, but he believed in God. And what was interesting about Sir Isaac Newton, I mean, he basically invented physics, the laws of optics, laws of gravity, laws of motion, calculus. I mean, when he was self-quarantining during the plague of 1665, he invented calculus. But he spent more time studying the Bible, looking for hidden messages than he did science, which I find is interesting. But he didn't believe in an afterlife or a soul. And so his progeny was Newtonian reductionist materialism. The only things that exist are what can be observable. Then on the other side are the people of faith who look at the Newtonians as heretics. The Newtonians look at them as clinging to primitive, superstitious nonsense. So over the next 3 centuries, those divides, stay very, very staunch. And then quantum physics arrives at the dawn of the 20th century. And since the dawn of the 20th century until now, things have started changing. Quantum physicists like Dr. Michio Kaku, one of the co-inventors or originators of string theory, has said that eternal life does not violate the laws of physics. You have Professor Fritz Albert Popp from the Max Planck Institute in Germany. Okay, can you get more serious than a German physicist? I think not. And Professor Popp said, the brain is like a computer hard drive. And when the hard drive crashes, the soul does not die. It is transferred to the higher realm. In this way, we are immortal. All right, so now we have a German physicist and more than one. Then the Lebedev Institute in Moscow starts talking about eternal life not violating the laws of physics. Then you have Dr. Gary Schwartz and Stuart Hammerhoff at the University of Arizona. You have studies going on in Japan, South Africa, South Korea, Australia, all over the world. And so things are beginning to change. And what we have to realize is that science is not static. And like religion, there are different schools of thought within it. Back in the 1920s, Nikola Tesla said that with advances in telephony and television, okay, television was a rudimentary thing in 1926. He said, one day the world will be a universal brain and will not only be able to talk to each other through technology, but to see each other on a device small enough to fit in a man's breast pocket. He was talking about a cell phone. He was talking about a cell phone decades before the technology was invented to create one. And so he was scoffed at. Oh, that's science fiction. That's pseudoscience. That's fantasy. So look at it this way. The science fiction of yesterday is the science fact of today. I met George Takei, who played Mr. Sulu on Star Trek. I was at an event and I met him and he was hilarious. He said, you know, the communicator on Star Trek that you flip open and all that? He goes, isn't that one of the most, he goes, we had those in the 60s on the show and it was science fiction. He goes, and aren't those one of the most annoying things in the 21st century? So just because we may not have the technology now doesn't mean we won't. And if you'll indulge me for a minute, this is an important point. The best friend I ever had was Billy. We met when we were 11, went to junior high, high school, college together. After college, I went to law school. He went to Asia, learned to speak Japanese, Indonesian, Thai, and Cantonese. He was a linguistics genius. And the Afterlife frequency opens with one of our adventures in Bangkok, Thailand, because I spent a couple months with him in Asia. And let me tell you, if things had gone differently, I would not be sitting here right now. I would be communicating to my family through a medium. And throughout our entire life, we had this ongoing debate about the existence of God and the afterlife. We were both raised in the Catholic faith, and he was an atheist, yet I believed in the other side, if you will. And I remember when we were in Asia, and I was going to, every time we were at a Buddhist temple in Southeast Asia, I'm there talking to the monks and, you know, meditating with them. And he said, you give me things to think about, Mark. He goes, I don't understand how you do the psychic thing. He said, but the problem is there's no science and there's no technology that can detect a spirit. So I don't believe it. Well, this was this ongoing debate. It wasn't an argument. It was an intellectual debate. That's what I loved about this guy, you know, my best friend. And I remember one of the happiest days of my life. Let me see if I can get through this story without losing it. I performed his wedding ceremony. I was a notary public and he met this beautiful woman in Japan. We're still really good friends. And I'm standing there and there's my best friend and my new best friend. I'm about to marry them. And I looked at the crowd and everybody I loved was there. My parents were there, his parents, all of our friends from college, kids we'd known forever. It was just one of those shining moments, you know, when I look back on my life, is that does it really get any better than that? And it just seemed so wonderful. But 3 years later, he succumbed to suicide because he had a lot of issues with depression and alcoholism, and there's a lot of issues. Brilliant guy, but he had these problems, and naturally I was devastated. I mean, it's quite a long story, but I'm going to keep it shorter. So about a year after that, my first book, Never Letting Go, had come out, and I was on tour, and Rocky had arranged for me to be a speaker at this paranormal convention at the Stanley Hotel at Estes Park in Colorado. And so I had given my presentation, and then I was down in the conference room, and I'm signing books. And she wanted to check out all the paranormal investigation equipment, because a bunch of people from TV were there, and they had all these, investigation and, ghost hunting equipment. And Rocky's walking around, and she was going by this one table. It was this guy named Chris was manning the table, and he was displaying what's known as the spirit box scanner. And she's walking by, and all of a sudden she hears, "Get Mark." So Rocky stops, and she's looking at this thing, and Chris looks at her and goes, "Did that just talk to you?" And then she hears, "Get Mark." And he goes, "Do you think it means you're Mark Anthony?" So all of a sudden I'm hearing, Mark. And I look up, and they're waving at me, and I knew something was up, and there's all these people, crowding around the table. So I get up and I run over there. And just as I get up to the table, I hear, "Dude." And I couldn't believe it, because I knew that voice. And then I heard, "Love you, bro." And Rocky had tears in her eyes. And I looked at her and I go, she goes, "Mark, that was," I go, "that was Billy." We both recognized his voice. She knew him. And the thing is, we grew up in the surfing culture of East Coast Florida. He always called me dude and bro. In fact, the last thing he ever said to me was, "I love you, bro." And so now this machine is, his voice came out of it, and then it filled with static. And so, my initial reaction was, I was just befuddled, and the thing is, I'm the medium. I'm the one that's used to doing these things to people, not, because that's, my ability, my gift. And then it got me thinking. And then I realized this was what I call spiritual synchronicity. Another one of the new terms I'm introducing. And I thought, wait a second, the atheist who told me there's no technology, there's no science, what did he select to make direct contact with me? A piece of technology. He used science. And it got my wheels turning and turning and turning. And that is why I wrote the Afterlife Frequency. And I purposely did not put that story in the book, because I knew that I would be asked, "Why did you write this book?" And I wanted to be able to tell people about that. And that's just it. Everybody experiences spiritual synchronicity, where you find yourself in the right place at the right time for that message from your loved one, from your child, or you get some form of intervention by a spirit which changes your direction that day, or your decisions in life. And looking back on this, that is exactly what Billy did. And this is not something unique to me. This is something that happens to all of us. And when you have an experience like that, and you employ the raft technique, you'll recognize the contact from the spirit, accept it as real, feel it, and then trust the message. And that's how you'll get the maximum benefit out of contact from spirits.
That's absolutely beautiful. What an incredible story. And Billy must be so proud of you for writing this book.
It's hard. It's so funny, because no matter how much I talk about him, I always want to cry, because he was like my brother. And look, there is no loss greater than that of a child. Okay. I mean, literally, I'm preaching to the choir here. And, and it just pulls the rug out from under you. And the hard part, the hard part, one of the infinite hard parts of losing a child is that it feels like you've lost your future. You know, when we lose our parents, it's hard enough because we're losing our past. But your child, you know, and losing my best friend, it was like losing a huge part of me, you know, because he was one of those friends that was always there. You know, I remember when my mom died, you know, he was living in California, and I had, you know, during her service, I gave her eulogy, and I looked in the crowd, and there he was. You know, I knew other people that couldn't condescend to drive a half mile to the church because they had plans that day. He flew in from California. You know, and the thing is, when we lose somebody that means so much to us, it's devastating. It pulls the rug right from out under you. You know, I know that there's a book, How Do I Go On When All I Want to Do Is Die? I think that was written by somebody in helping parents heal. And I know all the parents here can identify with this. And that's why understanding the afterlife frequency is so important. One of the concepts, if you'll indulge me just for a minute, one of the key concepts that I'm introducing is the electromagnetic soul. And this is a 21st century term to explain what we really are, which is pure consciousness, a soul that is eternal electromagnetic energy. All the major belief systems teach us that the soul pre-exists the body, comes into the body, moves on after the body dies. We know from the laws of thermodynamics and physics, energy is neither created nor destroyed, only transferred from one form to another. We know from neuroscience, the study of the human brain, that the brain has an electromagnetic field, an extremely complex one. And so when we die, think of your brain as a drop of water that plunges into this eternal sea of souls, the collective consciousness. But I developed the term the electromagnetic soul because that's what we are, pure consciousness, which is eternal electromagnetic energy. And when the EMS, the electromagnetic soul, leaves the body, that energy field stays coherent. In other words, we take us with us when we die. And so understanding the electromagnetic soul and how its vibrational frequency is shifted to a higher frequency and becomes part of the collective consciousness that is the afterlife frequency, understanding that helps. It helps us understand and realize that our loved ones didn't disintegrate. Their energy, they can't be destroyed. They have simply changed frequency. And it was made very clear to me not long after my mother died. I was practicing law full time, and my mother died in her sleep from heart failure. And I was driving back from court. It was about two weeks after she passed. And all of a sudden, when those waves of grief hit me, and I know everybody here knows what that is. It's not a wave; it's like a tsunami. Okay, and I pulled off, and I pulled into this parking lot in front of a strip mall because I knew I couldn't go into I was a senior partner in a law firm. I couldn't go in there like, you know, crying and all that. But I'm sitting there in my car, and all of a sudden, this flash of light went off in my head, and I looked to the passenger side, and I saw my mother's silhouette in this beautiful silver white light. And her voice filled my head. And she said, Mark, you were given the gift of mediumship so that you would not be crushed by grief. But now you must help those who are suffering with theirs. And she said, and your life message is to help people understand that God exists, that heaven exists, that our souls are immortal living spirits, that we can communicate with souls, and that we will be reunited when it is your time to leave the material world. And I fell back into the seat of my car, and I'm like, oh my God. Talk about an aha moment. And, you know, the thing is, these type of experiences happen to all of us. Sometimes they're subtle. Mine just happened to be like a fire hose right in the face. But the thing is, they happen to all of us. And it is true. God, the divine power, exists. The afterlife exists. Our electromagnetic soul is eternal energy. We can communicate with those souls, and we will be reunited with our loved ones when it is our time, our appointed time, to leave the material world. So I think maybe we should close with that thought.
I think that that's a beautiful thought to close with. And I know that your mom is also very proud of you. What a beautiful thing for her to tell you all of that. And look at what you're doing in the world. And you are helping so many people. And I, for one, am incredibly grateful. As a matter of fact, when Mark came on tonight, he said, "What do you want me to do? Am I going to do gallery readings? Am I going to," I said, "Well, we want you to talk about your book," but he was ready. He is always ready to help all of us. And I did see in the chat box, does he do private readings? He still does private readings, which is kind of unusual for someone who's so busy. I also see in the chat box, "This is awesome," over and over and over again. So everyone's loving this. I would love for you to come back if possible before the new year, if possible, to maybe do some readings if you have a chance, or right after the new year, if that's a possibility. But
Sure. Yeah. Work with Rocky. She'll, yeah, I let her do all that because of, I'll screw up the schedule. She won't. But the thing is, I would like to return to do a gallery event for all of you. And yes, I do private readings. My website is afterlifefrequency.com, just like my book. And I invite everyone to sign up for my newsletter, because then you'll know when I'll be doing events. You can order the book through there. It's available at all fine bookstores. It's on Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com. And like I said, you can find out about private readings. And every Thursday, I have a live stream show, The Psychic and the Doc, on the Transformation Network. And my co-host is Dr. Pat Basili. And she is a no-nonsense, street-smart behavioral psychologist with the most incredible heart. In fact, this Thursday, our guest is Colonel Diane Corcoran, a U.S. Army veteran, and because it's Veterans Day, where we want to honor our veterans, and she's also a near-death experiencer. So this ought to be a really interesting show. And I want to thank everybody for tuning in tonight. Thank you all so very much, and I very much look forward to my next appearance and doing a gallery reading for all of you. God bless you.
Oh, well, thank you, Mark. And don't forget, Mark is one of our keynote speakers at the conference next August. So come to the conference and hear him.
Both Mark and Rocky at the conference, if you come to the conference. And also, Diane is also the head of IONS. And so I'm very excited about hearing her speak. And thank you so much for doing this evening. This was just so uplifting. And I hope that everyone on here, I know that a lot of people are asking about how to connect with their kids and how the ways that they can better do so. The most important thing is that our kids are working just as hard as we are to connect with us here on earth as we are with them. And we're going to be connecting with them. And no matter what, when we see them again, it's going to be as though not 1 second has passed. Everything is going to be as it was when they transitioned. So I just thank you so much, Mark. Thank you so much, Rocky. And have a wonderful evening. And I know that you'll be back. So thank you again for doing this evening. And
Yes,
please,
and
everyone
unmute yourselves and say thank you and good night.
and also,
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
Mark.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Mark.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful the rest of your
Mark.
week.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.